And again, thank you too, and we'll get started. We've got bookmarks for everybody when it's done. Wes and Reed.
So thank you. Jessie Stone is back. Colorblind is the 17th Jessie Stone book. I have my notes, so I know this to be true because I wrote them down.
It is correct.
Yes. Police Chief of Paradise, Massachusetts. 5th go for Reed Farrel Coleman. So thank you and welcome. So last book, Hangman's Sonnet.
Yes.
Left with Jessie going off to rehab.
Yes.
And now he's back. It's been a few months. He's actually committed to sobriety. And he walks into a whole lot of stuff.
Yes,
You wanna-
stuff is the
Stuff.
polite word for it, yes.
This might be widely distributed.
Yes,
We'll
yes.
see. So to describe what he walks into.
Okay, well, he's back from rehab, which he's finally, I think that bears a second of discussion, is I've written 5 of these. Before me, a gentleman named Michael Brandman wrote 3 of them, and before him, Bob Parker wrote 9 of them before I poisoned him. No, Bob was a great guy. I was unlike Ace Atkins, who writes Spencer, who'd never met Bob Parker. I'd actually met Bob Parker, and he ran in the other direction. No, he was a lovely gentleman.
He didn't want to be poisoned.
No, yeah, he was drinking, and just as you pictured it, he was drinking a glass of scotch. And we met at a bookstore party in Boston. He's a lovely guy. Was very patient talking to me, even though he had no idea who I was. But he was a very nice guy. So back to the book. In that Jessie, I've written 5 of these books. Jessie has been a heavy drinker in every one of them. In fact, in the initial book, Night Passage, which came out, I believe, in 1998, Jessie was hired as the Chief of Police of Paradise because he was an alcoholic,
Right.
because he was drunk, because the people who ran the town council thought he'd be easily manipulated, so that's why they hired him. And that is the great irony of the series, because he's turned out to be anything but easily manipulated.
And speaking of the first book, you have a Easter egg going right back to it.
That's
and the first murder that happens.
Right, absolutely, because to get back to the alcoholism in a second, this novel, Robert B. Parker's Colorblind, available now in Novel Books, is what I call a change novel. I've written my own series. I've had one that was 9 books long. And what happens when you write a long series is you find out that as the books go on, you begin to clog up the books with backstory. And you wind up telling the same parts of stories throughout the books. And it gets hard, it gets to fill up a lot of space in each book, and it gets boring for the writer. And if it gets boring for me, it'll get boring for the reader. So I did it in my Mo Prager series, in the 5th of the series, called Empty Ever After. I think it's 5th or 6th of the series, called Empty Ever After, a title gained from my bank account. And in that book, I did what I do in this book, which is to say, look, Jessie's been drinking since the first book, a lot. I mean, Johnny Walker owes Jessie Stone a lot. And as I say, it's hard to drag your character over the same hot coals for 17 books. The readers get tired of it. I'm very tired of it. I get very tired of writing Jessie drunk. And I thought, it's time for Jessie, who has periodically tried to stop drinking. But as Dix, his therapist, says to him, his attempts at stopping drinking are kind of like a kid holding his breath, right? You're going to, no matter how long you hold your breath for, you're going to breathe again, unless someone's holding it for you.
Right.
So his stopping drinking in the past was always like a kid holding his breath. He was going to drink again. Well, there have been circumstances in the last few books that I've written which have caused Jessie, A, to drink much more intensely. Oh, thank you for coming. Thank you.
Sorry.
No,
Latecomers are fine.
That's fine, that's fine. She has to buy an extra book now, though. No, so, there have been events over the last few books which has caused Jessie to drink even more heavily than he normally drank. The murder of his fiancée, in debt to pay, a case where his friend turns out to be a complete louse in the Hangman's Sonnet. And so he's hit rock bottom. But really the thing that's made him change, and if you've read the series, is Molly and the medical, Molly, his right hand, and his medical examiner friend Tamara Elkin have called him selfish. That his drinking is selfish. And that's one thing Jessie isn't. And when they call him selfish, he realizes it's time. So he goes to rehab and is serious about it now. And in the book, he's actually going to AA meetings.
Right, he's following through on that.
He's following through, which is not anything he's ever done. He's always tried to do it himself before. And I am not an alcoholic. He says with a glass of water. Can you give me another one, please? No. And if not, can I have yours?
She don't share her wine.
Yeah, so I just felt it was a time for me to, and you know, Jesse's all about doing right. That's who he is at his core, doing right. And the thing is, he would recognize when Molly and Tamara say you're being selfish, that the right thing to do, finally, is to really be serious about it and go to rehab. So he comes back from rehab, and you'd think he'd have it easy.
No,
No.
then we'd have no books.
No, as my friends like to say, what I do to I should call my protagonist Job. Because I really like to torture the hell out of my
That's the
protagonist.
formula, isn't it? You have your
Right.
barrel, you put them up in the tree, you throw rocks at them,
Right.
set the tree on fire,
Right.
and then get them down somehow.
Right, the idea is I like, what makes for a good mystery novel is to have your protagonist challenged. I mean, it's a very simple formula. People don't realize it when people say they want to write, and they write a book and it's competent, but they don't really challenge their protagonist. So I make up for that.
Right.
I really challenge my protagonist. So,
What he walks into, there's been an attack on a black jogger on the beach, and there's more information that comes out about it. She was there with a white kind of boyfriend of hers, and then similar attacks start happening throughout Paradise and the environs, and it leads to a group that's behind it. It's all orchestrated.
right. Jessie, it's pretty early on, discovers that there seems to be an concerted effort to cause trouble for interracial couples within Paradise. And flyers are being put, you know, on car windows and in people's mailboxes from a white supremacist group couching the language of white supremacy in we're here to help you save and preserve your town, which is how it's done. I mean, you'd think on a place like Long Island where I live this wouldn't happen, and it does happen periodically, same thing. Not the crimes, although there is the occasional cross burning, believe it or not, on the lawn. But there are, every year there are flyers put in people's mailbox, not in my town, though there was a cross burning in my town. Like 5 years ago. So yeah, no area is immune, I think, from this. And really the genesis, and by the way, just I have to do this caveat. I don't write message books, right? I can't stand when people get on a soapbox. It's the thing I hate most of all. And the whole idea when I write is I don't want you to realize there's a writer. I want you to think this is real, and the worst way to do that is to say, this is how the author feels about X, Y, or Z. Well, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in seeing how my protagonist deals with things. So I'm not writing a message book. Let somebody else do that. So while the subject is obviously a touchy subject, and one that's very prevalent in the news, I noticed the statue, by the way, is missing from the park. That, how does Jessie deal with it?
Right.
That's the interesting thing. How does Jessie deal with the woman being attacked, the cross being burnt, the flyers being left out? That's what interests me, and that's what I think would interest readers, not what I think about it.
And not just Jessie, the other people
Right.
in the department have
Right.
their own take, almost, not exactly lockstep with Jessie, but they feel the same way. They
Right.
have the same mind. And in amidst all of this, the only African-American police officer on the force is set up. for
Right.
something.
Well, we don't know that she's set up, but it seems that way to Jessie.
Right.
Is that I've thought for a long time, and by the way, I turned this book in, the manuscript for this book, the month before Charlottesville. So,
Wow.
so I've been thinking about this for a while. What's been on my mind, the genesis of this book has been, what if a black female cop shot a white, unarmed teenager, right? That's the kind of thing. Writers ask themselves questions, and that was the question that led to this book. What if? And that's what writers ask themselves all the time. When people say, where do you get your ideas from? I often say a post office box in Schenectady, New York. But actually, where writers get their ideas from is they ask themselves, what if? So my what if for this book was, what if a female African-American police officer shot an unarmed white teenager? How would the groups align? Would Blue Lives Matter be on her side and the Black Lives Matter be on the kid's side? So, that's where the idea came from, not from, this is how I feel.
In Dallas, they just had the white police officer that killed the unarmed black man.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. So this is this is obviously a question that's out there. So it's not like I thought of something original. I just wanted to juxtapose it. Let's see how the groups would align if we switch the roles around. So that's where the book comes from.
And you have groups come in on
Of
both
course.
sides of the issue.
Yes.
And you also have a third group come in because Jessie can investigate this.
Right.
Because it's his department. So state police have to come in, which takes the matter out of Jessie's hand officially.
But of course,
Yes.
he's all about doing right.
Right.
Not necessarily about doing justice, but about doing right,
So
which
there-
are different things.
So there's all of this going on, and then there's a mysterious kid that shows up in town that Jessie
Yes.
feels compelled to help out.
Yes, there's a kid shows up in town, and what I realized this afternoon when I was doing a radio podcast with
Mary
Steve,
Beth.
Steve,
Oh,
Steve,
Steven,
yeah,
yes.
Steve Ussery,
At the library.
right at the library, was that the emotions of this kid, Cole Slayton, and the emotions of the white supremacists, the same emotions: anger, hurt, and pain, and fear. And so, on the one hand, the white supremacists have a target, a broad target. Cole Slayton has a very narrow target, one person,
Right.
Jessie Stone. He comes into town with a backpack and the chip on his shoulder the size of Boston. And that chip is for one person, Jessie Stone. Yet Jessie, of course, the guy who believes in doing right, kind of takes this kid under his wing. Of course, with Cole Slayton kicking and screaming
Right,
the whole time.
every inch of the way.
Every inch of the way. So Jessie comes into town. Molly's, pardon my language, pissed off at him because she had to become acting chief, and that's the last thing on earth she wanted to do. There's this new kid in town who's caused all sorts of trouble. There's been a skinhead biker gang who showed up in town, and all of these obviously racial incidents. So wouldn't you want to come back from rehab and just face, this is what you're facing?
Rehab never looked so
Yeah,
good.
I think I wanted to go into rehab after writing this book. So that's kind of what's facing Jessie. So how about if I read one page of the
Absolutely.
book? And then we'll talk about anything you guys want to talk about,
Sure.
the rest of the questions. You know, Bob Parker wrote a lot of books. I mean, you know, look at that. You know, my bibliography is like 1 page. His is like 15 pages, annotated 15 pages.
Mine's 1.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the first page of the book. And it's kind of harrowing, if I do say so myself. She thought she might pass out from the ache in her side, or that her heart might explode in her chest as she ran barefoot along the dunes. Her beautiful long beaded braids, of which she was rightfully proud, slapped against her shoulders, her face, and fell in front of her eyes. She stopped, trying to catch her breath and to listen for them, for their heavy footfalls. But the low roar of the waves swallowed up all the sounds of the night, much as they had overwhelmed her cries for help. Too tired to think, she bent over at the waist, sucking in huge gulps of crisp sea air. Her throat was raw from screaming. Sweat rolled down her forehead, stinging her eyes. It covered her dark black skin and soaked through her sports bra, panties, and torn warm-up suit. As her wind returned to her and the stitch in her side subsided, she felt the burn of her sweat seeping into the nicks and cuts around her ankles caused by the brambles and sharp dune grasses. Her jaw was throbbing from where one of them had smashed his fist into her face. And as she pressed her fingers to the swelling, the absurdity of the situation rushed back in like the waves on the beach below. This can't be happening to me. Things like this happen to other women.
Welcome to paradise.
Welcome to paradise, yes. Well, that's Swan's Harbor, so it's not
Okay.
paradise. So
It's
it's
right
just
next
outside,
door.
just next door.
How long did it take you to write this one?
About 4.5 or 5 months.
You started with the one what if question. What did you throw in after the first draft?
Well, you know what? I only do one draft.
Really?
I know people get very upset at me when I say that, but I'm a fierce re-editor. So as I write, I edit. Some people, pardon this expression, but some people are spewers. Like they get the whole book done, and then they go back, and they don't do any editing at all when they write. They just plow forward. And me, I can't do that. So I'll write a paragraph, and then I'll stop, and I look back, and I rewrite the paragraph until I'm okay with it. Next paragraph. So I've really done 500 drafts, and not one draft.
One paragraph at a time?
Right, one paragraph at a time. Yeah, well, because my training is actually, I never took a prose writing class. My training in writing is poetry. So that's a very poetry-like a method or process of writing. And if you can't tell by the language, the poetry never left me. So that's kind of, I don't have an outline, like I never, you know, we've discussed this, I never do an outline. Because my theory is if I don't know what's coming, and I'm excited or surprised by it, when readers read it, they'll be excited and surprised by it. As I often end by the reviews of the books.
Right.
No, so that's how I write.
The only other thing I want to touch on, some of the names of the characters, especially those, there's 3 particular ones. I don't know if you want to spoil it for the audience or not.
Let's spoil it.
Okay, you've got, there's 3 folks involved, and they all have names, and they're very clever and relate to the overall theme that you set up.
And who might they be?
I didn't write these down, but there's Lee Harvey,
Oh, so,
there's James Earl,
and John Wilkes.
and John Wilkes.
Yes. Well, I thought, and there's Drake.
And there's Drake. He's not in that set.
As I said to Drake this morning, not only did I make him a bad guy, but I made him an insignificant bad guy. He actually laughed at that.
Yeah.
Yes, and then he burned my voodoo doll.
That's what I switched him out.
Yeah.
That was Aces.
Oh, no wonder he said his feet were burning today. No, the camera
The
stopped.
camera stopped.
So I decided to, if I was that man, I would name my sons after people I viewed as heroes, but who other people would clearly not view as heroes.
And that mindset also plays into a very important point, kind of late in the book, that I'm not going to bring up.
Right, please, yes. When Jessie puts the dress on. No, no, no. Yeah, no, I don't change characters much.
Well, who do you think he would have named the daughter?
Oh, that's a good question.
Thank you.
Maybe Lizzie Borden.
Lizzie.
Yeah.
Isn't that terrible?
Yeah. No, I'm not sure. I would have found somebody who was obviously awful to African Americans, and who,
Leon.
somebody, and named it,
Think
but,
about it.
well, next book. That's the kind of thing that's fun for me and actually what I said today is writing the bad people are much more fun than writing the good people.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
Drake, that was fun.
If you were
Torturing.
bad people, you wouldn't need newspapers.
Yeah, no, I mean, writing bad people is, because the idea about writing bad people is they're not just bad. Even the white supremacists are not just bad.
Oh, we've heard that.
Yeah, no, I didn't say there were good people.
They just
but
have more layers, like an onion.
they can be complicated too. And in fact, Jessie becomes very friendly with one of these characters, because they share.
They do have something in common.
Have something in common. That's the fun for me. If people are just bad, how interesting are they?
It's like they're just wearing a hat.
Yeah, it's just like wearing it. It's when I teach writing classes, what I try to tell people is, thank God I love teaching, I hate marking. And you can't there's no answer key with writing, so you really have to read everything they write. And boy, there's nothing, it's like torture reading, like undergraduate writing. Oh my goodness. One time the trick to writing good characters is believing that your characters have whole lives, have full internal lives. And the trick to doing that is, we all have things that we know about us, I do, that embarrass us just thinking about it, that you don't even like thinking about it, but and I tell mine to the students. So there's this girl I had a terrible crush on in college, and I saw her on the subway platform out near school, and I went to say hello, and I drooled. And it was like, oh, that was great. And I was horrible for years and years and years. I mean, she forgot it the second I did it. She forgot me 5 seconds after that. But, that tortured me for a long time. So if you can believe the characters you write have those kinds of secrets, or secrets, right? That's another thing. We all have secrets that are just ours, and that we really don't want to tell, other people. And we all have them, right? Except Pat, she doesn't have any of those secrets.
That's because I got a confession.
Right. Yeah.
We'll talk about that on the way back there.
Yeah. So we all, and when you write your characters, if you believe they have things that embarrass them, and if they have secrets they don't want to tell anybody, then when you write them, they seem real. And I always use this as an example. How many people today drove by someone walking a dog, right? That to you, that's just somebody walking their dog. But to them, you're somebody who just drove by in a car. So you have a full life, so you have to assume they have a full life. So that's my philosophy about writing, is that there's no such thing as a minor character, and there's no such thing as an all good character, and there's no such thing as an all bad character.
Like serial killer.
I mean,
Their neighbors
well,
think they're good people, right?
yes, oh my, those are always mine. He was a loner, but he always said hello to me. Yeah.
Red was good to his mother.
Well, here, let's do the thing I do with writing students. Let's try. Everybody here seen Silence of the Lambs?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, a nice Chianti. So who was the worst person in Silence of the Lambs?
He was the prison warden. It wasn't him.
You're the first person, Dr. Chilton.
Right. He
was
was the worst.
is the
Yeah,
word?
yeah, he
Yeah,
was the
the
worst
psych, the
person.
head of the psych hospital.
Right.
You are the first person who ever got
Well, he
that right.
was.
Right, you know why? He was a bully.
He was.
He was a bully.
And there were no redeeming
And people hate, right.
qualities.
See, even Buffalo Bill, who was a serial killer, loved his dog. Precious, right? And so he was a horrible person, but he loved Precious and he loved the butterflies, right?
So therefore, he knew how to love something.
Right, he knew how to love something. Hannibal Lecter is not the worst guy, even though he ate people while they were alive, right? But really,
But he's not the worst though.
right, he wasn't the worst. Dr. Chilton is actually the worst person because he has no redeeming features. He's a bully, and he lords it over everybody, and he gets Clarice in trouble, right? So think about, what goes into, actually, a lot of thought goes into writing these books. And not only by me, by even guys like Ace Atkins, who is one of my best friends. Yeah, because only we know what being like
That's
raw.
only because he writes Spencer, right?
Raw. I carry him. No, Ace and I every time I come to Memphis, Ace takes me to a different barbecue place. So yesterday was Cozy Corner.
We have 20.
That was great. I know, so I hope to keep coming back.
I was going to say, you
Yeah.
can come back for many
Yeah,
years.
yeah. And that's what I try to do in most cities I go to, is find the best barbecue. Like I'm going to,
The
by the way,
worst
I'm-
barbecue in Memphis is better than the
best
best barbecue in any
Yeah.
other
That's
town.
so true.
well,
It is.
so people in Austin, Texas would disagree with you.
Well, they're
They don't
wrong.
know.
But they don't know barbecue, they know too.
Yeah.
And I happen to be after me, I'm sure that's true of the next city I'm going to, which is Minneapolis. They make much better lutefisk than which is lye-soaked whitefish, which
Well, let them have it.
yeah, thank you, right. But then after that, I'm going to Houston and Austin. Houston, you'd think, cities in Texas 3 hours apart, Houston has the worst barbecue. It's amazing.
It's getting so bad in Texas with their barbecue that I heard Corky's is moving in. Yeah, I was in the paper a while back where
Well,
they're
if they
setting
burn
up
down
there.
Corky's, you'll know why. No, so I try to go to barbecue places whenever I'm on tour. And Ace always takes me to a different place here. I mean, he tolerates me, but he loves the barbecue. Yeah.
Any
So,
other questions?
yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments,
I wondered how you felt when you first heard about Virginia.
I felt,
I mean, did you feel like, oh my gosh?
no, I felt very prescient about it.
Yeah.
No, I was horrified by it, and I was horrified by our president's reaction to it. Don't forget the state our president comes from. And we know him. There's a reason he lost by 30 points in New York. He was always to us just a colorful clown-like character. So I don't want to get into politics too much, but
As a person, I'm sure you had that.
yeah, oh no, it felt very, there was that odd sense of, here's that good bad thing. I felt, oh, see, I got it right, but oh my God, how horrible. Yeah,
There wasn't any of the,
yeah,
oh
no,
my
no,
gosh,
and
I conjured this up.
and trust me, I have no love of white supremacists. I'm Jewish, and I have no love of white supremacists, and I'm a true believer in freedom of speech. So I have no desire. I'm totally anti-censorship, and I'm an absolutist about freedom of speech, because for freedom of speech to work, the idea is you have to expose stupidity to the open air. So I don't believe in squelching speech at all in any form. I mean, if you own a private company or a private business, obviously you have the right to do it, and that's different. But in a public arena, as much as distasteful as I found the Nazi demonstration, I think it serves a purpose. Running over people in a car, that's where I kind of draw the line. So, and that was just handled, and any police officers in here will tell you, it was handled. That was just handled badly. The demonstrations were handled badly. You have to keep people separated. Let them scream at each other all they want, but you got to keep them separated. And that was just ugly. Book burnings are pretty ugly. The saying.
I think To Kill a Mockingbird is on the cutting.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, the famous expression is first they burn the books and then they burn the Jews. So it's I'm totally for freedom of speech and totally against censorship. So that I am standing on a soapbox about.
That's okay.
I just figured it must have felt kind of eerie
It was.
to have written what you wrote.
But it was
and
easy
then-
to see coming. If
Yeah.
you didn't see this coming, you weren't paying attention.
Right.
That's the way I felt. And what I think is interesting in the book is I really tried very hard to avoid me coming out in the book, except in the artistry of the book for whatever it's worth. And you read the book, so.
I have.
Yeah, so, my feelings are unimportant. It's Jesse's feelings and the other people in town. It's their feelings that are important. Yes.
Does Jessie kind of take over when you're writing and you?
Jessie channels me.
Yeah.
See, it's different for me and Ace, and if this gets too technical, just let me know. It won't stop me. Just let me know. The Ace's job, and don't tell him I said this, is much harder than
Wait a minute, let me call.
Yeah. Yeah. Ace's job, and he's heard me say this, and I've said it in front of him, in the hopes that he'll continue to take me for barbecue, is that Ace's job is much harder than mine. There are 40 Spencer books. So being original, oh my goodness, is not easy. It really isn't. Secondly, his books are in first person. So he has to sound like Spencer, right? I don't have to sound like Jessie. It's in third person omniscient. So I don't have to sound like Jessie. I just have to know what Jessie's thinking and he's doing. But Ace, it's much harder than what he's doing. But, he was an All-American, so screw him. What I always say is really a killer is we do signings together, and people will bring up his book and my book and sign them, and then there'll always be this gorgeous, modelish looking woman who says, will you sign this? And it's him on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And I say, I'm never doing a signing. I'm never doing a signing with him again.
Until the next one.
Right, that's because I love the guy. So.
Well, his books are shorter.
Yes, but I'm shorter than he is. My only joy is that my son is taller than he is. No, Ace is a great guy, and it's inevitable that we talk about each other a lot because, we're in this.
You've got a shared universe.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a different thing, like with Robert Knott, who wrote the Westerns. He didn't share the universe with us, but Ace and I have crossover. And now the Sonny Randall books are being published again by the sports writer Mike Lupica is going to be writing the Sonny Randall books. Well, he's short. So, we we'll all share a common universe, and we all have to talk to each other. Like, I guess this isn't giving away a secret. 2 books ago, I killed Gino Fish, who was the head of the mob in Boston, and Ace and I had to discuss that, and then we had to ask the editor, and then the editor had to ask the estate, because they have final say. I can write a whole book and they can reject the book. and then I'd have to hunt them down and kill them.
That's why you have your other series with your own characters.
Right, who will kill them for me?
Those Boston Italians you grew up with, they can get that job done.
Brooklyn
Brooklyn, I'm sorry.
Don't ever confuse Boston and
You
Brooklyn.
know, we were talking about earlier, I know some guys.
Right, I know some guys. I worked at Kennedy Airport cargo area for 5 years. I really do know. You know.
Good fellows.
Any other questions, any other things?
Yeah, so what I missed while I was gone?
It'll be on the video.
It'll be on the video, actually. Most of it will be on the video. No, yes, sir.
Do you have any other projects working beside the Robert B. Parker?
Yeah,
Jessie Stone?
I've been hired by the film director Michael Mann to write the prequel novel to the movie Heat. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, you try it sometime. Yeah, working with Hollywood is a real trip. And Michael Mann's a really smart man. To be a film director is no easy task. You have to be like a puppeteer and really have to know a lot about everything. You have to know a lot about editing. You have to know a lot about cinematography. You have to, it's amazing how the breadth of knowledge you have to have. But it was funny when I went to see him and sit in his office, and how I knew I wasn't in Kansas anymore was I went to the men's room, and on the mirror in the men's room was a thing, don't forget to pick up your Oscar ballots. You know, it was like, okay, yeah, this is not New York anymore.
By the commode.
Yeah, right in the, on the.
No, I mean the ballots.
No, the ballots might be, yeah. No, it's very strange. It's very different. I like Los Angeles. The problem with Los Angeles is about one thing, the movies. You know, New York, right, is about a million things. Los Angeles is about one thing.
You know, ask Lee Childs.
Yeah, well, I just saw Lee Child, so.
They tortured him.
Oh, about Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
Well,
tortured
you know,
him.
by the way, good news for those of you who hated Tom Cruise as Jack Reacher, Netflix is gonna do Jack Reacher as a series. So, and they're gonna not have Tom Cruise will not
They
be.
did a good job on Bosch, so.
So, yeah, but that's not Netflix, that's Amazon.
Oh, that is
Yeah,
good.
that's Amazon. And I was talking to I just saw, it's time for name drops. I was just at the World Mystery Convention called BoucherCon in St. Petersburg, Florida. And I talked to Michael Connolly about Bosch and Lee about
Jack
Reacher. And, you know, but people don't understand it. It's great that people are so invested in your characters that they get offended.
You mean Jack doesn't really live?
You know, yeah, but you'd be amazed. There's a group called Reacher's Creatures that take it really seriously, very seriously. And I've had to rescue Lee, actually, from fans who were basically, you know, like, how could you, you know, and we were at a Cleveland mystery convention, and people were really angrily attacking him, and I said, well, come on, we have to go sign these books. And I pulled him away. But the best thing that ever happened was, for some reason, Lee Child comes to my book launches in New York, and we've known each other for a real long time. He is, by the way, one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Most of the time, mystery writers, except for Ace, are really nice people. I mean, I'm sure that's your experience, that most mystery writers are pretty nice people. And so Lee is at my book launch like 2 or 3 books ago for one of my books as opposed to one of these. And someone in the audience says, well, who would play Gus Murphy in a movie? And I looked right at Lee and said, Tom Cruise. He laughed and then left. No, so thank you very much for coming, and if I could sign your books, I'd really love it.
I think they've got a counter set up down that way.
Okay,
So
well,
you head
let's
there, and thanks again,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank
We
you
have
very
bookmarks
much.
from 91 Straight in the Morning.
Yeah, y'all.